Before we get into today's episode, don't forget to sign up to the book and the VIP newsletter at thehighestandbestuse.com. For the book, you can get that at Amazon, Chapters, Barnes & Noble, all of these places in paperback, ebook, hardcover, and of course now the Audible version as well. So grab the book, sign up to the VIP newsletter, thehighestandbestuse.com, and now to today's episode.
I'm Clinton Edwards, and the highest and best use for my business is land development and drafting and design.
Thanks for tuning into the Highest and Best Use Real Estate Podcast, where we talk techniques to optimize your land structure, skill sets, and time, as well as the highest and best use principles to make your business more profitable, productive, and efficient. I'm your host, Ryan Carter. Money, the good deals are found, great deals are created. Today on the show, my guest is Clinton Edwards. Super cool guy. So here we go. Clinton is the senior designer of home drafting and design. He's involved with single-family redevelopment, commercial and multifamily properties, and he specializes in work with real estate investors. So my man.
How's it going?
What's up?
That's good to see you, Ryan.
Welcome
It's been a while.
to the show. This is fun.
I know it is.
I actually haven't seen you in a bit. You're right.
It is, yeah. I think the last time was actually sitting in Oshawa in probably the building department.
That could be.
Putting in some permits.
That could be. Isn't it funny? I always find it funny that like you see people in certain settings, right? Or you see them on social media, but like nothing in between. It's never a social gathering. It's always like we're working.
That's it. Got to pound that pavement, man. We got things to do.
Tell the folks a bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Clinton Edwards. I've been in this industry for, oh my goodness, as long as I can remember. My parents used to build houses when I was younger, so I've always been on job sites.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then when I was in my university years, I actually worked as a kitchen designer, so got a lot of experience working on like 2020 programs and CAD-based programs. And once I left that, I didn't use any of my English and cultural studies degree, obviously, and went straight into construction. So I worked with investors like Rick Summers, and I was working on a lot of his
Rick was on the
redevelopment.
show.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
I love that guy. He's
guy.
awesome. We did a lot of redevelopment, a lot of single family dwellings with accessory apartments, and he was one of those guys who gave me the opportunity to work with a lot of the cities, and I got to build those connections with them, and then kind of went out on a contracting basis myself. Didn't take long before I got headhunted and started building new houses for another company. Yeah. And during that time, they realized, oh my goodness, you know how to draw. I'm like, yeah, it's just doodles on paper. It's what I like to do. So it turned into an opportunity where they allowed me to challenge the exams for my BCIN, got my building code identification number, which if you know is allows you to basically do design without being an architect or an engineer. So I got that qualification, and ever since I have been running my own business, home drafting and design, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. How long has it been now?
We're at 5 years.
Wow.
5 years we've been going at this. I mean, obviously I was doing design before that, so I probably have, anywhere around a decade's worth of experience doing real estate investment projects and redevelopment. Yeah. But really, the last 5 years has been the business running.
Jeez, man, time flies.
It does. It does. Well, I mean, the forever flu kind of that took up a lot of time there. There was a big hiatus there when I didn't see you. So yeah.
So we're going to talk about redevelopment today for the purposes of reconstruction redevelopment for the purposes of construction and renovation. So in terms of that, I mean, this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, this is my niche, right?
How do you identify highest and best use in some of these areas? Where do we start?
Well, I mean, definitely need to start by hitting the ground and hitting the websites, figuring out exactly what the property is, what its zoning is, what the restrictions are on the property. A lot of the properties that we deal with are usually single family dwelling residential properties, but that has now opened up as well too. Like the idea with C23, we now have this whole concept of we can do purpose-built triplexes in certain areas, or 2-in-1 with an exterior structure outside. There's so many possibilities of intensifying that property that weren't available to us just even a year ago. So it's really cool that way.
It's true.
A lot of the properties that I look at are usually those type of developments. We do have a couple where we're looking at the sites, and is there the potential to sever? Is there, because again, now if we I know.
Yeah.
So if we can put three tenants on one property, can we split it and do more, right? I mean, you open up the possibilities of from triplexes to sixplexes to who knows what, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many possibilities at that point.
Do you have a favorite? What's your favorite type of project?
I've really been enjoying the accessory dwelling units as their own separate structure. Mainly, again, because my background was doing brand new construction. I really enjoy that sort of idea. It reminds me of all the custom homes that I get to do as well. I do really enjoy that. But I've got another project that we just finished working on that was like a 63 unit building. And that was just awesome to do, right? To be on as a consultant on that and actually be part of it was just sort of neat, because I don't usually get those opportunities. A lot of the stuff that we do is more of the lower density, you know, up to about 10, 15 units that we're usually working in. So it was a really cool opportunity to be part of something like that.
So let's break down a few types of projects. So you got, I'm going to write this down. So you got ADUs.
Yep.
You got 63 units.
63 units. Yeah.
63 units. Okay, so we'll talk about that.
We just finished up, or it's in the process. We got the permits and everything for it. It's been working. You can't miss it. It's right at the corner of Simcoe and King. That was a redevelopment that we did there.
That's in Oshawa.
That's in Oshawa.
Okay, so Oshawa.
Like I said, we've got a couple of ADUs that we're doing right now between Whitby and Clarington.
Yep.
And then we've also got these opportunities where a lot of the municipalities took C23 and they're like, it's okay if you put a second unit in the basement or somewhere in the house, but it has to be in a separate structure. But Clarington, they're willing to just have that, all 3 units in that one structure. So now we've got a lot of purpose-built triplexes that we're developing as well too, which is kind of neat.
So let's talk about the ADU. So obviously the ADU Bill 23 came through. Where do we stand with that as of current?
Oh, it's awesome. I love it. I love every minute of it. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the municipalities have taken...
And what is an ADU for the folks who don't know?
Yeah. So it's an accessory dwelling unit. So originally we had accessory apartments, and I know... You know, we get into semantics. I mean, I'm sure you probably called it before garden suites. Like,
I'm a coach house guy.
Oh, coach house. Okay, sure. Coach house. You know? Laneway houses.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, from the perspective of doing a lot of work with the cities, I'm always cautious of the term that I use, because garden suites for the longest time was sort of...
It's a different thing.
A very different thing.
Yeah.
You had a very temporal perspective on it. It was only about 10 years and then it had to be decommissioned.
Isn't that insane?
It was stupid. I don't know why. If you're building a structure that's allowed to be residential, why would it ever have to be decommissioned? You can keep the structure, but I can't keep the use.
People in it? Yeah.
That's weird.
Silly.
Anyways, so I love the idea. Like ADU kind of encompasses all of that now. So whether it's inside of an existing single family dwelling, if it's in a separate structure, it still all kind of meets that criteria, which is awesome.
One title, typically?
One title.
Yeah, one title.
Yep. I mean, you've got basically 3 units all on one property. Again, there are opportunities where we're looking at severing properties, and you know there might be the possibility of selling stuff off. But for the time being, yes, we're looking at a single property with the single family dwelling and then the separate structure. Whether the single family dwelling has another unit in it, sometimes it's not really a plausibility with what you have there.
Yeah.
I mean, for years we've always put them in basements, right? But now let's think outside the box. Let's do an addition. Let's do a top up. What can we do to utilize that space better, right?
So if you get somebody with a small lot, let's just say, because I like the idea of a top up from a functional perspective. Sometimes the cost doesn't always work out, but sometimes it does. Yep. So if you get somebody with a small lot, they're like, yeah, we can fit the parking, but we don't physically have room for a house and a garage and parking and amenity space and all this. Is the top up the logical next step?
I think it is.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it makes the most amount of sense.
Is that better than doing an addition?
Well, cost-effective wise, usually it is, right? Okay. You've already got the foundation there. You've already got to build a new roof anyways, whether you do an addition or not.
True.
Right? So all you're doing is ripping off the roof that's there and putting on a new roof. You had to build the floor system anyways,
Cut
right?
the roof off.
So you...
Cut it off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just you just take a saw and just off it comes,
like
right?
a piece of bread.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, from a cost perspective, to me, it makes the most amount of sense. I mean, there have been properties that we've been looking at recently that have cloaca on them as well too, and the idea of being in a floodplain,
cloaca being conservation.
Problem. Yes, so Central Lake Ontario Conservation Authority. There's other ones, GRCA and other ones, but this one specifically we were looking at had cloaca protection on it. And, okay, so what do we do in this situation? Because if we build a structure out back, we've got flooding issues. But with this, if we're topping it up,
it's the existing footprint.
It's the existing footprint, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity if the footprint's already there. I mean, you don't get into situations where you have too many zoning issues, usually. I mean, it can happen. I mean, there's one property we were looking at on Bloor Street where development up meant setting farther and farther back from the property line just because of the zoning, right?
Sure.
So again, back to your original questions. We're going to go full circle back where we were.
Yeah. You never know where these shows are going to go, folks.
Where do you start? It really comes down to the zoning, right? So if the zoning will allow it, then let's push it. And I found more and more there are so many properties that we have to go for a variance to make it work.
Like height, setbacks, all the above?
Yep,
Yeah.
pretty much. We had the one we were just doing an ADU on Crawford and Whitby, where we had to have 3 different variances that were required. One was kind of an obscure one. We could get closer to the property, but as soon as we put a window on the back part of the property, it had to be 7.5 meters off the lot line.
Oh, wow.
So it was a little bit of a weird one. Again, so Whitby, like most other municipalities, they have the sort of the trifecta rule. So the lesser of 8% of the lot,
right,
or 10% coverage of all of your accessory buildings, and less than 60 square meters of total coverage, right?
Yeah.
Or sorry, 50% of the main dwelling unit as well too. So you've got all these different criteria, whatever the lesser of. So in that situation, we were well under 8% with 60 square meters. But the existing structure was something stupid, like 800 square feet. We would have been limited to like 400 square feet for the actual structure.
Because it's the most restrictive of those criteria. It's the most
restrictive of, it's the lesser of. So we were stuck to this point where it was like 400 square meter or 400 square feet. We're like, why? Why would we build something like that? So we ended up going, let's do the whole 60 square meters. Because we're still under 8%. And even though we had several neighbors that were not happy.
Unhappy. Come on.
Not happy.
I don't
know why these people don't like people building in, backyards right next to them. But, you think that they own the lot or something and they're upset about what we're doing. But, again, with variances, I'm sure it's been your experience as well, too. Unless there's a really good reason for it, they're going to get passed. I think there was one, I don't know if you saw that one recently, where a guy took 3 lots and he was trying to make it 4 lots in the entire neighborhood.
Oh, really?
Nuts.
No, I didn't see this.
It's the first variance I've ever seen not get passed.
Really?
And it was
spicy.
It was a show. I stayed on. I got a bucket of popcorn. I sat down and watched because it was everyone in the whole neighborhood.
A bucket of popcorn.
Oh yeah, it was a 2-hour film, man. It was great.
Wow. And it got
denied.
Stopped.
It got totally stopped.
So then, for somebody in that circumstance, whether it's this person or otherwise, what is their logical next step beyond that?
Well, I mean, I guess you can appeal. You can go to LPAT and appeal. But I mean, if it didn't get approved there, chances are you're going to have the same fight. It's going to be an uphill battle the whole way.
So you got to say, like, okay, does this make sense to go to court if I want to fight this? What's that lot worth? What's the court going to cost me? Because if a lot is worth whatever a building lot's worth, what are your lawyer fees? What's your time worth? What's your mental space worth?
Yeah, really.
Right? How much is this going to suck you out?
Well, and I try to find the path of least resistance, right? I mean, that's always you want to get the highest and best use out of a property. But
is that so?
Yeah, I know. Funny.
That's incredible.
It's funny I should mention that, right? But yeah, I mean, obviously you're going for highest and best use, but if you have the planning department not on board, if you have all the neighbors not on board, and then you go to the committee, it's going to be a fight. Yeah. It's going to be a fight. And I've had some like that, and I've won some of them.
Yeah.
But it's, that becomes a 50-50 chance at that point. But again, most of them have been easy. Right?
Do you have a preference in terms of doing the accessory structure in the back, like a detached garage with living quarters, versus doing a top-up, versus doing 3 units in an existing house? Like, what's your preference and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. I love new builds. I do love new builds. They're definitely, again, path of least resistance. Yeah. You get to basically design it the way you want it to be, right?
Purpose built.
When we get into something like, just to bring up one of your projects, 96 Ontario that we did. I mean, that one was fun because there was so many things that had been modified and reconstructed, and they had turned outdoor living space into indoor living space, and it made it more challenging. And those situations, they're fun, but they're usually ones that you don't just get to go in, figure it out, and move on. It's one of those ones where you're constantly going back to the drawing board. Oh, we opened up a wall, and suddenly there's no joists over here holding up the floor. We don't really know how that's happening. We had that on one project. Oh, my goodness, man. We went into this one project. It's a legal non-conforming triplex. And, again, we started the construction of the project. And this is one of those things where, you could never see it coming. There was a couple of additions done on the project. Yeah. And the most recent part was at the back. But at some point, someone had taken a loft and converted it into living space. So we're up there one day, me, a contractor, Jeff, remember Jeff from Complete Contracting Solutions. So I got him, me, and...
Shameless plug.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Jeff. Shout out to you, Jeff. What's up?
So we're up there. A couple of his guys are up there. We've got the owner up there with a couple of people that she's brought. And we're all chatting here in this bathroom talking about how we're going to redesign everything. cut to a couple weeks later, and they start opening things up, and the floor was literally barn boards. They were 5/8 boards that were about 7.5 inches high, and they were spaced out every 24 inches. And where we were standing had actually used to be a set of stairs that went up into the loft.
Wow. And
so it was all just, you could see that it was all just piecemeal together. Dog's breakfast, like a horrible floor. And I'm sitting there looking at it going like, I know how much I weigh. I have a good idea how much Jeff weighs. I start adding it up. I'm like, I don't know how that floor didn't collapse on us, right? There was nothing holding it up.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary. You know what? It's funny, though, because when there's flooring on top and everything's drywalled and painted and looks good, you don't know what's under it.
No.
You don't know.
No.
Until you know.
Yeah.
And then it's not always good.
I mean, a lot of times when we're doing a lot of those bungalows, it's easy, right?
Yeah.
When you start getting into the second stories, I mean, I was at a client's house just yesterday who they're not looking at redeveloping anything. They just want to open up their own kitchen. And just to open it up, I start looking at how everything's put together. I'm like, you realize there's beams running right through here. There's a post right where you want to put your island. Like,
it's always the way.
Yeah.
It's always the way.
And there's always a solution too, right?
Yeah.
It's just a question of how much time and money.
That's right. Everything can be solved. That's dollars.
That's it.
It's just
That's
dollars.
I tell everybody, it's time and money. Whatever you want to do, we can do it.
Whoa. Hang on there, Bingo. Don't forget to check out the highest to best use playbook before we get back to the episode. Amazon chapter, Barnes & Nobles, all the different places. You can go to thehighesttobestuse.com for direct links, or you can check it out on those websites directly, and you can get it in hardcover, paperback, and ebook. And of course, we talk about the 3 tenets, the core tenets of the highest to best use: land, structure, skill sets, and time. Those will really benefit your business. Now back to the episode. Let's loop back to a top up for a sec. So speaking of money, so for anybody who wants to do an ADU in the backyard versus something purpose built versus a top up, for example, can we talk about what some of these things may cost in today with construction pricing? Do you get into pricing at all?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So let's go top up first.
Yeah. So top up, that's a good question. I would say if we were doing a brand new build, let's start there. That's probably the most easy one to kind of figure out.
Like ground up, new
foundation, whole thing, right? Because that's what a lot of these ADUs are doing, and so that's very prevalent in my hand. You're probably looking at anywhere around $350 a square foot to build that, right? And that's pretty standard. I mean, if you're building a brand new house or whether you're building an ADU, that's what to expect for a
So if you're doing 3 units, 1,000 square feet a piece, you're 3,000 square feet, whatever, 2-3 bed, whatever.
Yep.
You're like $1 million.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's not that far off, I don't think.
Plus the cost of land.
Plus the cost of land. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have to finance it, and then like insurance and things like that.
Yeah.
So
demolition if there's anything on there already. If you got to move stuff. Yeah. Even just hooking up all the connections as well too. So a lot of municipalities with these new structures, they don't want to see things coming through the house, except for water, which is a whole. It's one of those weird things I keep running into. They want the water supply to be on 1 meter for all the structures on the property, but sanitary and sewer they don't want to see coming through the house. Which I understand sanitary and sewer, and to me, I mean, keeping it all separate just makes a whole lot of sense. It's a whole separate structure. But with the water supply, they only want it on 1 meter. Yeah. So that's all fine and dandy as long as you can get to some connections out in front. Sure. And heaven forbid you ever get into a situation where the connection isn't there and you can't tie into it. I mean, hopefully if the house is already there, it's there. But I have run into places where you have vacant lots and then you find out that the connections haven't been
there,
put
down the street.
Yeah,
extend the sewers. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that gets pricey. It's
very
really
expensive.
Fast.
Yeah. Fortunately, I knew I had to extend the sewer. I factored that in when I was buying it. But for people who don't know, they go, "Oh, that's 6 figures. Yeah, that's a lot of money."
Yeah. And there's a lot of streets you wouldn't expect it that have both the sanitary on it and the water supply, but don't have storm. Yeah. And that becomes a bit of an issue as well, that's too. Where do you discharge that water? That's what we ran into with another ADU where we ended up discharging into the back property into a French drain because that's the only way that we could dissipate it. Everybody else was very worried, again, about the negative impact of all that flooding, right? Yeah.
What about a top-up? What does a typical top-up cost? Let's say 1,000 square foot bungalow, cookie cutter brick, this kind of thing.
I mean, you're taking off basically your foundation costs, right? Everything else is staying basically the same for the footprint. So I would anticipate for something like that, you're probably in around the 275 to 300 range, right?
Assuming you're keeping the main floor?
Assuming you're keeping the main floor. So assuming you're just topping up. And there's some misnomers about, well, can you actually do that? Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many houses were built prior to in the 1950s and 60s that had 2 stories to it that were all 2x4s. So you can keep it 2x4s, but if you're going to increase your R value, then it becomes a bit of a challenge. How do you mitigate getting insulation to fit into a 2x4 cavity.
Yeah.
If you want to increase that while you're in there. And of course, that's the best time to do it, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be making that decision afterwards. That's a horrible idea.
It's always the nicest when you can do, if you're going to do your top up, because you've got to put extra insulation on the exterior for an addition, right? At least with Ontario Building Code.
Yep.
So it's always nice if you can reface the entire building. So it looks like it was all done at the same time.
Exactly.
But it gets challenging when you have to add that extra layer of insulation. You go, okay, now we got to step it out. Things change, things don't line up. How do you mitigate these circumstances?
Well, again, usually with a second story, you have that opportunity. I haven't found a lot of people wanting to put brick on the second story. And a lot of cases you have to be cautious of that anyways, because depending on how the footings were designed in the first place, can it actually support that? So as much as you may have the first steps working on zoning for if the property can be developed that way, the second thing is, well, if you're going to use an existing structure, can it handle what you want it to do, right? True. So there's a lot of situations, especially when it comes to top-ups. The first thing that I suggest to people is either dig a hole inside or dig a hole outside, because we need to see how big that footing is. Because I can't design a second story if the footing is only 12 inches wide. And I've seen it where there's no footing underneath the house. Yeah, that's always fun.
Can you imagine? I can't imagine. But then again, who knows?
I can understand it to a certain degree, because a lot of the houses that I usually see that on are rubble foundations, and they're 20 inches wide.
Thick, okay.
Right? So it's not like, oh my goodness, it's an 8-inch wall and it's just sitting there.
So it's sinking in the dirt.
Yeah, exactly. It's usually got some base to it, usually larger than what my footing would be on a house anyways. So that's not too much of a concern. But again, depending on the size of that footing, you might not even be able to get stone or brick on the second story. You might not be able to support it. So in most cases, if we're doing an insulation, we're doing siding, then we have that opportunity to push the floor system out beyond the wall. So you've got a little bit of a cantilever over top of the brick. But then if you wanted to sheet everything with insulation, you can go straight down. You want to cover the brick right up, why not? I've got a house we're doing right now that, lo and behold, we discovered that there's a whole pile of brick underneath the siding. They just sided right over top of the brick, and I'm like, it's a beautiful brick. Like, I don't understand why you would cover it up in the first place, but they did.
I got stuck in a property like this where it was sided over top of brick, and we pulled a bit of the siding back. We're like, oh, the brick might be okay. We could maybe save it. Pulled it all off. We're like, the brick is a total mess. Reside the whole house. Terrible decision.
Yeah.
But, nothing venture, nothing gain.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. The only one that's more scary, I find, than that one is if you get into a brick and block house, right? Because sometimes that can be a real challenge. And it's one thing to have to reframe, a wall, but when you start getting into opening up, we've got, again, another house in Toronto that's all brick and block. So when we start putting in new windows, we've got to reinforce basically brick and block on either side. So it's lintels and it gets scary. You got 2 stories, you're opening up the main floor. That's a lot of brick that's just arching over top of it. Especially old stuff. You don't know if it's going to come down.
Let's talk about old stuff. So it's my understanding that neighborhoods typically go in like 80-year cycles. The first 20 is like the first homeowner thing.
I read that in your book.
Isn't that incredible? So have you noticed this? Like, once you hit like the 80 to 100-year time, like, you're kind of done. Like, the house has kind of seen its day.
Pretty much.
Or unless it's historic and well maintained.
I mean, if you get the historical society involved. That's
right. Now it's a restoration job.
Now you're into a whole nother nest egg. It's been a challenge working with the heritage.
Challenge, air quotes.
Overall, I mean, it's just, and all we're doing is windows. It's just windows, and it's become such a challenge to do it.
What do you have to do to match the character? Like, how does this work?
So we actually worked with a company called Historic Brick Company, and they actually did the initial layout of how all the windows would be put together so that they would actually match everything. And again, that's not my forte, and I'm perfectly okay with somebody else taking the reins when it comes to the heritage end of it.
They'll make a heritage looking window?
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. So they'll make it all pine mullions or whatever needs to be there. They'll make it the same type of sash, and that's all well and good. In that situation, it's a little bit more challenging because a lot of the windows that are having to meet this criteria also happen to be windows that are along a fire escape. So it opens up a whole nest egg of
a fire-rated wood sash. You're like, what the heck are you going to do?
How do you do that, right? So we mitigated a lot of it. So some windows that didn't need to be operable, we would put what's called a sull sash on the inside. It's basically like a metal sash with a window on the inside that would function as your fire separation. And then a lot of the other ones, We used fire shutters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which are expensive and ugly.
They're so expensive.
And
they all have to be mounted interior because again,
these
it's
are
heritage.
interior shutters or shutters.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, because it's heritage.
Heritage, yeah. So you can't like tying to the brick. They're like, well, that's going to look odd. That doesn't look like it's supposed to.
They're not
be
pretty. Like they're not.
No, they're not. They're just a big box, right, with 2 rails down the side, right? So they're not overly the most beautiful thing.
Couldn't you sprinkler it? No.
Well, that's the other problem. So a lot of the windows, if we did do sprinklers, like I've had to do that on other projects where, yes, if it's a fixed window, it's completely solid.
Yeah.
You can sprinkler it, but they don't like it if it's got like a sash or anything to it because now the water doesn't run down it properly. I ran into that problem with where they wouldn't allow it to be like that. So, they actually rejected that idea because I did present that idea because I'm like, this has got to be a simpler option than doing the fire shutters. And just to add a nice little wrench in the whole thing is the whole 3rd story is all arched windows.
Oh wow!
So we ended up what we settled on was we're building down and drywalling the back place where the fire shutters have to sit.
Yep.
The fire shutters actually come down a ways on the window, so it's blacked out at the top where the curvature is, but then the rest of it can just run interior jams. Just fun. Just fun.
My gosh.
Yeah. So heritage is fun, but again, in most cases, if you don't have to deal with heritage, once you get to that 80-year cycle, I mean, unless you get something that is in really good shape, and there are some that are beautiful. Like you'd never want to do any work to it. Like I saw a barn of all things that we're doing up in Innisfil. We're converting it into a wedding setting. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I mean it was just sitting there before, and now they're changing it to a wedding venue.
So is that a resident? Because it's a resident. Oh, I guess like an agricultural use.
Residential agricultural setting.
Is it now a commercial conversion?
Yeah, so we've had to go into rezoning.
Yeah. Okay. Hold that thought. I want to talk about that later.
Okay. All right.
Because it sounds really good, and I want to like spend some time there because
Okay.
it's a hot button, right?
Yeah.
Residential to commercial conversion. Yeah. But I want to get into your 63 unit build.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk about that first.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So I did a little consulting on that project. It was really kind of neat. I got to work with the owner and develop a old tannery.
Wow.
So a lot of environmental.
I was going to say,
a lot of environmental on that one. It was a bit of a challenge because I wasn't at the reins of all of it, which it makes it a little bit more challenging. I do like being more involved in those types of bigger projects because then I have the ability to know exactly what's going on.
You're not third-party information.
Yeah, you get third-party, and sometimes you're getting no party information. The funniest meeting, I think, was when we were sitting down with the engineers at one point, and he goes, we've got it all figured out as far as where, plumbing is going to come in, our electrical is going to come in. We've got it all coming off of the existing road that's there. And he drops a bomb on us, and he's like, oh, yeah, well, we're actually blocking this edge of the street off, and we're going to take the service road in. We're going to make it an actual road. It's not going to be a private road. It's going to be a full road, and we're going to develop the other 6.5 acres that are up there. Like, well, that changes. We're going to have to go back to the drawing board for civil, right? Because that's a huge undertaking. Now you need to make sure that you've got enough power coming into the area. You've got to have enough, large enough sewage lines and everything. Just the pressure of water that's going to have to be fed into that area. It just changes.
And this was municipal services?
Oh yeah, it was municipal services. So it's fun one. But it was a really neat project because again, we're taking something that was from 2 stories and converting it into a 5-story building. And it went through so many different evolutions. At one point, it was going to be an older adults sort of senior retirement type building, like the one that they built over there at the corner of Oshawa and Whitby on Highway 2. And then it developed into more of like condo settings, and eventually it became more of almost like an affordable housing. So we got down to a lot of 2 units, mostly 1 units, and then a few bachelors where we had to kind of fill those in. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So 2-story to 6, you said 5 or 6?
5-story, yeah. We looked at 6 at one point, but 5 is what we ended up settling on. Yeah.
At what point do you say, okay, we have to do so much to this building? If it's not historic, do we just take it down and start again?
Well, that's a good point, right? If this had been in a different setting, again, going back to the foundation, what we had to start with, I would have been pretty hesitant about using what's already there. But it being a tannery, it was actually a double 8-inch block wall to start with. Yeah. It was built right on Canadian Shield. So there's like no footings. It's literally right on rock. There's no place for it to go.
So you had a good base to work with. You're
amazing.
Like, this is the best.
Like really, the biggest hindrance to us being able to go any higher than that was seismic and wind. Those were the 2 biggest things, right? Seismic, yeah. You wouldn't think about it, but I mean, the higher you go up with a building, especially if it's all block, the more opportunity you have for swaying and movement, and then
seismic right on the Canadian Shield. Where, Northern Ontario, Southern Ontario?
We were actually looking. It's just north of Roseneath. So
So southern-ish Ontario.
Yeah, but right across the Trent River. So
yeah,
I mean, right across the Trent, like it's at the very edge of it. So
nice view.
A beautiful view. Oh, 100%. It was a gorgeous location for the project.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the. It ended up we ended up having to build a whole bunch of, because of the length of the building too. It was 200 and some odd feet long.
Yep.
So we ended up having to build a whole bunch of shear walls into the design to be able to actually support the load, because again, you've got this long wall that's really got nothing holding it from swaying all over the place.
And has this been built since you guys did the plans?
No, it's still in the development stages, so we're still working
on
that. Yeah.
And is the top half stick frame or is the top half block?
Yeah, so it's all stick frame. So
Okay.
we have 2 layers of block. Now there's going to be obviously some block channels that have to go all the way up. We've got an elevator shaft. We've got 2 fire escapes that are going to have to be on either end. But for the most part, it's all going to be a wood or steel construction. Usually with I think every floor is I-joists that we're doing across it.
So it's clear span.
Yeah, well, not entirely. It clear spans across the apartments, and then what we've done is actually utilize the central hallway through the whole building as our support walls. Yeah.
Have you seen this? They're not LVLs. They're similar. They're building skyscrapers with it now. It's a special kind of timber, high strength timber. There's a name for it. It's not LVL. It's not
PSL, is it?
No.
Okay.
No, but it's basically it's like glulam. It's veneer lumber that they put together, and they're doing full on high rises out of wood now.
That's wild.
And like everybody's making the comparison, because you go back early 1900s, all these cities, like they just burned down clear across, right? Because everything was wood and there was no fire separations.
Well, and that's scary, because like I know a couple of people who are in the fire department. One of my cousins is a chief fire officer in Toronto, and they've done tests on this where they'll actually take bets to see how quickly things will burn through.
Oh, no way.
Most of the firefighters can't predict when it's going to let loose.
Wow.
Like where with straight lumber, it was very easy. They're like, we got half an hour and it's going to come through. But as soon as that fire separation is penetrated, it's a bit of a crapshoot with that stuff, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because they say, I don't know anything about it, but I saw a YouTube video, which makes me an expert. They say that it's got the fire rating built in the wood, and like all the laminations have stuff in it. It's pretty cool technology to see it. Obviously, in practicality, that's maybe a different story. But I mean, what they're doing with it, I've seen them build buildings in Seattle and different places, and like it's pretty impressive and less expensive than concrete, because concrete is more money.
Oh, it's super expensive. Yeah, we looked at what it would cost to actually block up that building all the way up.
Sure.
Insane
amount of
block
up, block by block.
Oh my goodness. Well, even the shear walls, like there were 3 different options we had for shear walls. We could build it out of wood, we could build it out of block, or we could do it as a steel cross bracing.
Oh wow.
And I mean, steel cross bracing, it would have been the least invasive, but it also, steel's not cheap now. It's super expensive, right?
Very expensive, yeah.
Block though, way more expensive, because now we're talking about...
Is it the labor component to it that makes it more money?
Yeah, labor's huge, and the amount of material that's involved in it as well, too.
True.
I mean, you've got 5 stories, and we had 10 shear walls in the whole building. Like it's and those shear walls aren't short. They're they're basically the whole length of the apartment. They're 30 feet along. So it adds up. It doesn't take long before that becomes very, very expensive. So we looked at actually doing it wood, but again, when you start doing wood construction, you do have to do more reinforcement as well too. There's always that, right? So it ended up being like double ply on either side to be able to keep the wall straight. And then of course now you can't put anything. It didn't matter what we built it out of. You can't put anything in the middle of it. So now you're building all of these furred out walls for plumbing and electrical. And it's just it just becomes more and more. So.
Interesting. So when people do something like that, if you're not going to do it out of block is nice and quiet, right? Yeah. Concrete's quiet. But when you build it out of wood, it's hollow.
Yes.
So what other steps do you have to go to fire separate, sound separate, all of that stuff? Like how much drywall, what are we talking?
Yeah, well, we start getting into ULC ratings as opposed to your usual Part 9 SB building stuff, right? So you're getting into double layers of Type X. You're probably building the way that we had it situated. We had our shear wall, and then I actually spaced off of our interior walls so that there was that deadening of sound. There's that space between everything. And then even that, I was still speccing that we were putting insulation in between the joist cavities of the shear wall just to try and to kill some of the sound. Because like you said, it's a huge difference. You wouldn't think it, but there's a huge difference between an 8-inch block wall and even a double 2x4 wall.
Yeah,
how much
no doubt.
transference there is.
It's the mass. It's the mass that kills the sound, right? So concrete's heavy.
Yep.
Rock sol's not.
No, it is not.
And that's it. And you know what's funny? Funny story. I was looking at a spreadsheet from 2019, right? To date stamp this episode was 2023. 2019, a bag of rock salt was $30. I looked up that same. I know. I looked up the same. This was a Lowe's part number, right?
Yeah.
So I looked up the same part number on Lowe's like a week ago, and it was $92.
Oh my goodness.
30 to 92 bucks. Same part number, same everything. They've changed the name from rock salt to rock wool or whatever it is now.
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
Fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Same stuff, right? That's 3x.
Well, you paid for that advertisement change. That's what you did there.
That's right.
That's the marketing
That's
change.
right.
That's what you paid for.
Shout out to Rockwell.
I don't know if it's 3 times as much for that, but yeah, we'll take it. You know,
Yeah.
A couple extra letters. Yeah, a couple extra letters on the packaging. So.
Isn't that crazy? That's a lot more money.
Yeah.
How do people justify the cost in today's current economic environment?
Oh, I mean, I guess the same thing can be said about any of the materials, right? I mean, we've got the biggest issue is shipping costs, right? I mean, it's not cheap to send anything anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And then of course we always seem to run into these situations where as soon as construction season comes along, there's always some sort of flood or disaster down in the States, and everything has to be shipped down there.
Oh, no paint. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we experienced that with our eye joists and everything with LVLs not that long ago.
Yep.
I mean, everything went down to the States, and everything just jacked right up. Steel, same thing. And some of those costs come down, but it's kind of like watching gas. You know, it comes down, but never as much as what it was
back,
before.
yeah.
It never comes back to where it was before.
Yeah.
So,
what's a 2x4 cost today?
I don't even know. I don't even want to know. It's some stupid like $10 or something like that.
No, it's lower than that. Somewhere between 4 and 6.
Has it come down that much?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Okay, because it was at one point like way up there.
It was like at one point it was $2.35 pre-pandemic. Then it went up to 12.
Yeah.
And then it came way back.
Okay, I'm
But
surprised
still not
that
back to where it was.
I'm surprised it's come down that much, but
If you think about it,
yeah,
it costs $2. Like you need like hundreds and hundreds of sticks. People go, it's just a couple bucks. Well, yeah, it's a couple bucks times all of the wood that you need.
Yeah.
You
well,
know?
I mean, if that one stick of lumber has gone up, 5 times as much, then your entire build as far as your framing package is basically 5 times as much.
That's right.
I was getting quotes. I don't even understand at one point how some people were actually continuing with the builds. And it wasn't uncommon for some projects to be put on hiatus during that period of time.
Yep.
Where it just got to a point where my truss package went from $3,000 to $20,000. Like, what am I can't justify that for what we're doing there.
Yeah.
Right. There was a lot of, I was actually, I shouldn't say my business hurt by it. That's for sure. Because in all those situations, it was usually an opportunity for people to come to me and say, I got a problem. This is way too expensive. What can we do to change this?
Oh, wow.
If we're not going to do it a conventional way, what else can we do?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be uncommon for us to take like a roof system and put a beam across it and then drop all of our rafters off it, or put a king post in, or maybe an extra footing or something to kind of space things out so that it actually became more cost.
That's creative.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what
amazing.
I do, man.
Isn't that the fun part?
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, like again, the project that I was talking about where we're severing the property, a great opportunity. We looked at it and we're like, this is a 60-foot lot, and we can build semis on this without having to do any rezoning. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to knock down the house that's there. We're going to build a semi that is going to have 3 units on either side. We basically built a sixplex on the same property. Why wouldn't we? Absolutely. Let's do it.
In terms of your preference for being a service provider versus an investor, you can speak both languages.
I can, yes.
What do you prefer the most, and why?
I love doing the investing end of stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I haven't got to do as much of it as I would like to recently because I've just been, busy with everybody else's projects. So got to look after your clients first. That's number one.
That's how it goes.
Honestly, I do enjoy the investment side of it. It's exciting to get a new project and to be able to work on it and have, boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And of course, most of the projects that I've worked on, I've usually actually worked on because I, again, have that contractor background. So I enjoy doing the work. But it becomes a trade-off of, when I'm doing this, I'm not really making money doing the thing that I also am really good at, what I really love, which is doing all the design end of it. So
let's go to the next project. Actually, you know what? Let's talk. Oh, we could do the Oshawa and Simcoe, or we could do commercial conversion.
We could be here all day.
Oh, we could be here all day. Yeah. Holy smokes.
I got more stories than Disney. Go fire away.
How many coffees can we have? Thanks for the cups, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's
a
so
little shout out to my tumblers there, eh?
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Okay, let's go commercial conversion.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Why is that such a hot button in today's market? What's going on?
Wow. You know what? Honestly, it's been interesting with a lot of the commercial projects that I've been doing lately. For a period of time there there was a lot of people looking at taking commercial properties and looking at trying to convert them into residential.
Yeah.
Because trying to get people into commercial spaces is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
My office, I moved out of the commercial space I was in. It didn't make sense to me. So residential, you've got a lot more opportunity as a landlord to have tenants that you're going to keep. There's probably a little bit more rent control that way as opposed to the commercial end of it. But there's a lot of possibility. So again, Simcoe and King.
Yeah.
So this project was actually originally, I don't know if you've ever saw it before. There were four little commercial places down below.
I know of it. Yeah.
Yeah. 4 little commercial places down below. Believe it or not, it actually encompasses the property just to the south of it as well, 5 Simcoe, which had another commercial location out front.
Was this power sale? Did it go power sale?
It did. Yeah. In the middle of me working on it.
Oh, no.
So much fun. Yeah. Yeah. So remember how I was saying earlier before the show started that the only complications I have is when people don't pay me? It's one of those situations. The great thing was I actually got to pick up with the new owner of the property and got to finish off the project. Cool. So from my end of it, I basically picked up the baton and did it all over again. But it was great. So they again went through a couple of different ideas of what they wanted to do. Sever the one that was off to the south there. But eventually what they settled on, was to convert the commercial spaces into 2 units rather than 4 units.
Okay.
Keep the one that was to the south. The whole second floor was actually all office space originally.
Oh, wow.
Really underused, like super it was just one big open room. Like I don't know how they ever rented it the way that they did. There was one washroom at the end of the hallway. It was just bad. Yeah. And then over top of 5 Simcoe, they had basically like a storage area that had a spiral staircase that went up to it from the commercial space down below.
Was it a cool spiral staircase?
It was a pretty cool stuff.
Did it have character? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it needed to go. It was old, but it had some character to it. I don't think I would have got on it. I kind of looked at it and went, I'm going to use the other stairs.
I'll take the ladder.
Yeah, that's it. It's a little dangerous. And then there was a third story that was all residential. Well, the third story residential was only about 3 apartments. It was way, like, they were oversized. They were cut up really weird. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense the way they had it laid out. So what we ended up doing was we changed the commercial on the main floor into 2 units, 2 bigger units that were much more usable, right? Because again, all the ones that were in there were trying to be used as restaurants, and they were very tiny. Like sure, you could put public mobile in one, but that was, that's about what you could get. And there was a convenience store on the end, which was just underused as well too. So they split that up into 2 units rather than 4, and we would have probably converted it into 1 unit. In fact, at one point that was the plan, but that older building is actually made up of several buildings, the way that it's been put together. So there was a actual brick partition wall, a double brick wall that was in the middle of it.
Wow.
And they opened everything up. They're like, that's going to be a lot to fix. Let's just leave that wall where it is and we'll make it 2 units and that'll be fine. So we did that. And then that whole office space that was totally underutilized, we split into 4 units across there. Right. And then the space over 5 Simcoe, we made another unit. So now we've got 5 units across there. And the 3 units that were upstairs, we made into 4 units. So now we have a 9-unit, building that's there, along with the commercial spaces underneath, which are way more usable. How
long did all of this take to complete, excluding the power sale foreclosure situation?
That's a difficult thing to put a number on, because I did the process twice, right? So, like, I literally went through the whole process with the building department. We got it all settled. I got the permit in hand, and then it went into power sale, and then apparently they didn't pay the development charges, so they revoked the permit. So I basically had to go through the whole process all over again. Oh my God! Now, and fortunately, I mean,
and the design changed too.
The design changed, yeah, absolutely. So the client ended up they wanted to change how things were being heated as well too. So again, there was a whole bunch of modifications that we had to do. So at least put some money back in my pocket for the work that I had already done there. So it was, but again, really cool project because we were right there in the downtown core of Oshawa to get to work on. So
what about parking, density, things like this? Usually people want smaller units, more units. But you guys actually went opposite. You went bigger units, less.
We went bigger with the commercial, but we added a whole lot more residential. Okay. Right? So, and again, we're in the downtown core. So there's a certain area in a lot of municipalities, you've experienced this, I'm sure yourself, where parking is just not required. Yeah. And that worked out really well. I've got another project that we're working on just south of it on Simcoe Street that is just outside of that area, and it's it's a hassle. It's an absolute hassle because now we're
politics,
we're trying to take a round peg and fit it into a square hole. It's not working very well because we're trying to get enough parking there to make it all work, and it's going to involve a lot of variances to be able to make it work. So
and in terms of like actually doing the conversion itself, so some people get into a commercial conversion, they go, I'm going to make this residential, but then they don't really do the math. They don't add up all the, okay, we have to replumb, we have to rewire, we have to, the roof is different than we thought.
Yeah.
Like, what do people not know about doing a conversion that they should?
So residential, if you're going from commercial to residential, you're in a pretty good spot for a lot of the cases because the requirements for commercial is usually a lot higher, right? Your fire separations are usually a lot higher. Your requirement for floor load, it's 4.8 kilopascals as opposed to 1.9 for residential.
Right.
Huge difference when you're designing a floor. So there's a lot of freedom there. The fire separations, like I was saying, between commercial spaces can be 2 hours, 4 hours, depending on what it is. With residential, we're looking at maybe an hour. If you put in smoke alarms, half an hour. Like it's a lot more leniency as far as that is concerned. There are some things though, if you start getting into units that have more than 10 units, 10 dwelling units, we start getting into situations where fire alarm systems become a key component to the whole thing, right? And that starts to jack prices back up because now you've got to put something like that in.
What's a fire system worth?
It depends on how big it has to be, right? Yeah, if it's single stage or 2 stage, I mean it easily $10,000 right off the hop without even batting an eye. And then it depends on how many different checks and balances, how many different sections it has to be broken down into. Right, because every area has to be divided out accordingly. You got to have your hallway separate from this residential and from the second floor, from the third floor, and everything has to be chopped up as far as how they divide all that stuff, right? So it can add up pretty fast. That
can get complicated.
It can get very complicated.
How do you navigate that as a draftsperson?
So that's a great question. So I don't have to navigate everything myself because I have a team of engineers that I work with as well too, right? So I have a team of structural engineers, MEP engineers, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing, right? That help me work together. So I design it, and then they give me their feedback, they give me their designs, and then I incorporate that into my design as well too.
You think that gives you an edge? I would think it would give you an edge. Being able to talk and like figure those things out.
I feel like I've been very blessed with how everything has worked out for me in this whole situation. Coming from a contracting background and having done the work, when I walk into a situation, there are a lot of times where I don't understand how somebody coming straight out of school could do what I do, right? Maybe in brand new settings, you're building a brand new house or something like that. Sure. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You're building it from the ground up. But there's a lot of stuff where I walk into a house and I go, there's a beam in that ceiling. People are like, well, how? How is there? Trust me, there's a beam in that, and it's right there, and there's a point load over there. And like, how do you know that just looking at it? Because I've seen enough of it. I've built enough of these. I've opened up this stuff, and I've seen what I'm into here. I know what's going to happen here. Especially when you get into like bungalows, like it's become to the point where I wouldn't say that it's simple, but it gets to the point where I could almost do drawings with my eyes closed for some of those bungalows because I've seen the layout. I know what to expect. It's always funny when I have a new client and they're like, wow, that was a really great idea. I'm like, yeah, I've done that on 5 other houses. That's why.
So for people that are out there in the market, you know what to look for, but for the people that don't know what to look for, how do they buy effectively when they don't know what they're looking at?
That's a very good question. I guess it depends on what they're trying to build. That's always key. If they're building from scratch, well, then there's a lot more opportunity, to develop what you want. But if you're working with an existing structure, I mean, you definitely need to have some understanding. I mean, for the longest time, accessory apartments and basements, just simple things like knowing how much height you really need in a basement.
Ceiling height, ductwork, this kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you don't know those things going into it, I've had a couple of clients where it breaks my heart when you walk in and like, you don't have 6'5", you don't have your egress here. Well, how do we get that? Well, there's a couple
jack
of options.
Jack up or underpin.
Yeah, that's
pick one.
it. Yeah. What do you want to do? You want to jack it up? You want to rip it open? You want to remodify everything? I know you didn't want to touch HVAC, but here we go.
I had a guy on the show, and that's what he did. He was a house mover.
Oh, nice.
Jacks up houses and moves houses. Some of the coolest stories. Right. Yeah. But like that comes at a cost. So if you get a low basement, sure, you can lift it up. But like, what does it cost? Is it worth the effort? Can you just go buy a house that already has the ceiling height? If you knew, you know, like being educated on the way into that deal would be important. Yeah.
And I mean, if you've worked with enough contractors, I mean, just if somebody talked to me about jacking up a house, I'm instantly thinking, we're in the $20,000 range easily. That's without even batting an eye. But if you're going to underpin, it's not going to be that much different.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a heck of a lot more work because you're trying to pull everything out of the basement.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
I've even done the interior weeper systems, and that's a pain sometimes, pulling all that garbage out of the ground so that you can get everything installed.
You seen the conveyor belts? Some people have conveyor belts set. They're brilliant.
I've used them on a couple projects.
Have you really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
But again, you need a space big enough to get them out too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing a brand basement that's in the 1950s, you probably don't have a window big enough for it to actually get out, which becomes a bit of a challenge, right? So,
man, this has been fun. Your depth of knowledge is so impressive. That's one of the things that I always admired about you. And obviously, we've known each other for a long time. But like, I think your depth of knowledge is so impressive, and the fact that you can go into a deal, as you just mentioned, and you can see behind the walls, even though you physically can't. Intuitively, you know what's there, right? Your boots on the ground. You do it on paper. You can speak engineer. You can speak construction. You can speak all of the languages that you need to actually effectively pull off a project. So it was great having you on the show today. From me to you, from this side of the mic, very impressed.
You're welcome.
How can people find out more about you?
Well, I mean, the easiest place to find me is obviously on my website. So www.homdesign.ca. I gotta be very specific because everyone's try and put the E in there, right? And you can reach me via email, info@homdesign.ca. And my cell phone number, which is always on. Don't call me at 2:00 in the morning, please. Please don't do that.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, I've had some clients call me, and I think they're surprised when because I'm usually up at 4:00 in the morning going to the gym, right?
Stuff, yeah.
Oh yeah, and all of a sudden, they're getting a response. What are you doing awake at this hour?
Yeah.
I don't sleep.
Like, what are you doing calling me at this hour?
Exactly. What are you doing? So 289-355-4402 is another way that people can reach out to me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. There you have it.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning into the Highest and Best Use Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Carr, reminding you that good deals are found, great deals are created. Don't forget to check out the book at thehighestandbestuse.com, paperback, hardcover, ebook, and Audible now as well. We will see you guys on the next episode. Like, share, follow, and subscribe.